Hello, my name is Lena Kuklińska, and I'm here on behalf of Green Institute, a vegan think tank from Poland, the operator and initiator of the largest advocacy coalition, Future Food for Climate, which today connects 90 civil society organizations. I am honored to welcome you at the European Vegan Summit, which is organized by Green Institute. The European Vegan Summit, for the second time, brings together experts from around the world, the game changers for animal rights, climate, human rights, and a just, inclusive, ethical transformation of the contemporary food system. Why are we talking about the food system? I would like to bring some facts to visualize why this topic is so important that we dedicate an entire summit to it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports that the contemporary food system is responsible for around 25 to 30% of the anthropogenic global greenhouse gas emissions. This percentage is comparable to the energy sector. I will let it sink. 25-30% what's produced by the agricultural system when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions is also produced. It's the same amount that the energy sector produces. However, as highlighted by the researchers, if we leave everything as it is and continue producing and developing as we are right now, this number, 25 to 30% of anthropogenic global greenhouse gas emissions, will jump to 52%. An estimated 70% out of all these agricultural greenhouse gas emissions will come from meat and dairy production. But this is not the only problem that's with our agricultural industry. It is more than a source of the climate change. It is very hard to find another element of politics, economy, or social security, social life that has such a large impact on our futures, of the futures of humanity, of our planet, and of course of billions of animals. That's why we're here today. And for the next 1 hour and 45 minutes, we'll cover the status quo. Because as we see with the numbers, it's not sustainable. We will just, if we leave it as it is, we'll continue to destroy our planet. Hence, we would like to discuss the ins and outs of the contemporary food system, how it affects us, billions of animals, and the Earth's climate. I am extremely happy to welcome all of my guests, who I will introduce now. Some of them you might already recognize from the last year's edition of the European Vegan Summit, some from other projects and events of Green Institute, and some are with us for the first time, and out of many, I hope. And before I jump into introducing the people who are here today with me in the studio, I would like to just mention that sadly, Julia Lagana won't be joining us for this session due to illness. She works with the Healthy Food, Healthy Planet. Julia also led the Open Society European Policy Institute's analysis and advocacy on EU policies on migration, labor rights, and agri-food systems. She was also a senior advisor on migration, asylum, the EU and international affairs to the president of the Italian Chamber of Deputies in Rome. She has also worked with the United Nations. It's a big pity, but we hope that she will join us another time to explain the connection between the contemporary food system and issues such as unregulated migration and security of all people, not only in Europe, but also mostly in the global South. But to introduce the guests that are here today with me, I would first like to start with welcoming Professor Piotr Skubała, who is a professor of biological sciences at the Faculty of Natural Sciences, University of Silesia. He's an ecologist, author of plethora of scientific articles, monographs, scientific communications, and popular science articles. He's an ecological educator, nation conservation activist, and climate activist. He's a leader of climate reality, ethic expert at the European Commission in Brussels, in the Horizon 2020 program, a permanent collaborator of the AURA. He cooperates with local, national, and foreign media as an expert in the field of ecology, environmental protection, and climate crisis. Welcome. Thank you for dedicating your time to us. Next, we have, I would like to introduce Dr. Peter Carter, who is a retired family physician. He's also a founding director of CAPE, Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and more recently, a founder of the Climate Emergency Institute. Since 2007, he has been developing a unique approach to climate change risk, but by estimating the total committed, that means locked or unavoidable, global warming. Notably, Peter was an expert reviewer for the IPCC that I already mentioned today, fifth assessment report in 2014, as well as the 2018 IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius. In 2018, Peter co-authored the book Unprecedented Crime, Climate Science Denial and the Game Changers for Survival. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Our next guest is Anya Bellar, who is a member of the board of directors of the Spanish Political Party for Animals, PACMA, managing the areas of administration and international relations. She was a candidate for the 2015 Madrid elections and the general municipal and autonomous elections of 2019. She was the first on the list of her political party for the nomination for mayor of Madrid in May 2023. In 2011, together with other activists, she formed the animal rights group of the 15M movement, also called Spanish Revolution, a turning point for the animal rights movement in that country. Welcome, and thank you for being here today with us. Our next guest is Axel Anders, who studied psychology, drama, linguistics, and business administration in France and Germany. Already during his university years, he became involved in the organic farming movement and came into contact with the organic pioneer Adolf Hoops back in the early 1980s. In 2016, when recognizing the need for a consistently vegan form of organic agriculture, he connected German stakeholders in vegan farming with the Biocyclic network in Greece and Cyprus, thereby initiating the development of Biocyclic Vegan Agriculture. Welcome. Thank you also for being here today with us, dedicating your time. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Alexander Huntley. Alexander joined the Vegan Society in 2022 after completing his Master in Science in the Politics of Conflict, Rights and Justice at the School of Oriental and African Studies. As a research assistant, he is responsible for coordinating the Society's research networks, a community of vegan academic researchers. He's the co-author of several publications on vegan-related topics, including on the 2023 Catering for Everyone policy report looking at vegan catering provision across the UK's public sector. Welcome, and thank you for being here today with us. As you can see, our guests have done so much, and I just cannot wait for them to share their experiences with us at the European Vegan Summit. So without further ado, I would like to jump into our discussion, our questions. Let's discuss the current state of play, the major sins, the possible ideas for improvements in the future. And if you have any questions, write them down in the comments on any platform you are watching us, because at the end we'll have a short Q&A session. So if you're curious about anything that our speakers haven't mentioned and you know about, maybe you can ask them. I will read the questions out loud here at the end. But first, I have a list of questions that I prepared together with the Green Roof Institute team. So let's jump in. And the first question is for Professor Piotr Skubała. In a recent interview, you point out that the most important news in the history of all humankind is that our planet is dying. How does the current food system contribute to this death, to the planet dying out?
Yes, thank you for this question. I like this term, the most important message news in the history of all mankind. Yes, scientists use very dramatic terms to describe what is happening now to life on biodiversity on this planet, on our planet. The title of one of such article on biodiversity begins with the words biological annihilation. So scientists describe the situation in very dramatic terms like biological annihilation. How dramatically biodiversity has changed on Earth is well illustrated by some data. Let me allow some data. You know, many of you probably know, but they are very, for me, are shocking. 67% of vertebrate biomass today consists of cows, pigs, and chickens, as well as few other species of minor importance. 67%. Cows, pigs, and chickens. 60% of the biomass of all mammals on Earth now is made up of farm animals. Another figure. Breeding poultry, primary chickens, constitute 70% of the biomass of all birds. At the end of 2020, the mass of the human technosphere exceeded the biomass of all organisms inhabiting Earth. Biodiversity looks now like in these examples. How does the food system contribute to this situation, to the biodiversity? Some examples. The first, in 2016, an article in Nature presented the result of research by scientists from the University of Queensland in Australia and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, in which the authors look for the main causes of species extinction. In second place, among the key factors, the so-called big killers, agriculture was found. So, agriculture, mainly production, breeding animals, are the second big killers of life on our planet. So, extremely important. Second example, the role of agriculture in the destruction of our world is demonstrated by the concept of planetary boundaries. In 2009, a group of scientists led by Johan Rockström from the Stockholm Resilience Center and Will Steffen from the Australian National University, they identified 9 planetary boundaries that are crucial for life, for survival of life on our planet. 2 of them are in the so-called red zone, where the exceedances are the highest. This is biodiversity, and the second, the nitrogen and phosphorus cycle. Agriculture contributes to disrupting the circulation of these elements. We influence the circulation in the environment mainly by using excessive amounts of artificial fertilizers and developing industrial animal breeding. Currently, over 100 million tons of nitrogen-based fertilizers go to agricultural fields, accelerating the growth of algae. There is a lack of oxygen in the water for fish, and the number of dead zones in the ocean is increasing. So again, agriculture, breeding animals are on the second position of importance in this concept of planetary boundaries. Another example, you mentioned about this, I repeat this, the global food system contributes to 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions, including transportation, packaging, and waste. Agriculture today accounts for nearly 40% of the Earth's ice-free surface, which means agriculture, has a huge impact on the world we live in, on landscape, soil, water, resources, and biodiversity. What modern agriculture has done to life on our planet, to biodiversity, is well reflected in the opinion of Professor Ron Milo, one of the leaders in research on the global biomass of organisms on Earth, who commented on his research in the following words. When I do puzzles with my daughters, the picture usually includes an elephant next to a giraffe and to a rhinoceros. However, if we wanted to keep the true proportions, it should be a cow next to a cow and then a chicken. We live in really sad times. Life biodiversity look like this. Thanks to agriculture, the way we produce food, the way what we eat. Sorry for this sad picture of life, but it's unfortunately true. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I mean, indeed, when we talk about veganism, we can focus, or the agriculture, the food system, we would like to focus on the positives, because I think talking about the negatives all the time is not sustainable for many people, just personally. But it's we need to know the facts to be able to find solutions. So thank you for sharing the information with us. And correcting me as well, because you mentioned the 37%, not 25 to 30. That's indeed counting all the transportation as well of the greenhouse gas emissions, I mean. That paints a picture and shows even a worse picture, to be honest. My next question is to Dr. Peter Carter. You use Twitter as a platform to spread awareness about why and what we are facing today. Heat waves, fires, floods, and other dangerous but increasingly frequent extreme events. But despite the growing crisis, one would think that we don't learn from our mistakes. It wasn't so long ago that we could read on your Twitter profile that all human sources of methane emissions have increased. So we see the dire consequences of what we do, but we keep doing it. How far, from what you know, how far from sustainable is the current food system? And what are the consequences that we are already facing, that are already happening around us?
Thank you for the question, and congratulations on your second vegan summit. We just had Sustainable Development Goals big summit in New York, but I think that your vegan summit is every bit as important as that. Is the food system in trouble? Well, yes, it is. And there was a very large review performed, led by the FAO, the UN FAO, on this very question. It was in 2021. They published, it's called The State of the World's Land and Water Resources for Food and Agriculture. They had done one of these about 10 years previously. This result was very, very worrying indeed. Their key message is that the interconnected systems of land, food, and water are stretched to the limit. Convergence of evidence to agriculture's systems breaking down. So, your very words. With impacts that are being experienced across the global food system. So it's definite. It's been researched and stated formally that, as this paper actually said, agriculture is on the brink. The stresses to land and to water, particularly emphasized by this report, are increasing to this extent of stressing our abilities to feed the world population. We still are feeding the world population, and there's been a great deal of worry about that over the past few years. Certainly, some groups are in terrible trouble needing food aid with respect to increased drought and extreme weather events. But I don't want to give the impression that the food system is not providing enough food, because it is. So there's another recent paper that I'd like to bring your attention to, and that's a paper that's headlined, and it's headlined with the word vegan. which I like very much, and I'll explain why. So this was a research published in June of this year, 2023. The lead author is Piotr Skubała, and the evidence from the scientific research, of course, has been increasing and increasing in support of what you're saying is the essential reasons for switching our dietary behavior. So the headline here is the vegan diet massively cuts environmental damage. And this detailed analysis finds that vegan diets lead to 75% less climate heating emissions, water pollution, and land use than the more common, unfortunately, meat-rich ones. So this is very, very definite now. And the numbers are very big. And the effects of the meat-eating diet are such that another paper, which was published in 2002, found that without making the large transformation of our dietary choices, we are not going to meet the 1.5 degrees limit, nor the 2 degrees limit. So I'd like to say that switching to vegan diet now is sort of not optional. The science is saying that we have to do that. It's a question of our future survival. The IPCC sixth assessment, which was published in 2021, that told us that global emissions have to be put into decline rapidly and, quote, immediately. This changes everything, doesn't it? That means that it's not a question of slowly moving to the changing diet, okay? Everybody has to do that, and they really have to do it on a now basis. Some people will regard that as sort of negative thing. No, it's not. Mitigation of climate change is a very positive thing, because all the changes that science says we have to make will be changes which will improve our life, our health, our cities, towns, our infrastructure, and our land right across the planet. So in giving out these alarming messages, we are urging a huge transformation which will result in a much better life for all of us. So I think my time is up, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for, well, I don't know if a more positive message. I think we now see a very clear solution to the problem. But again, there's a big why. We know it, but we still go through with well, the status quo and what is destroying our planet. And when I think about this and why the system is as it is, I think about politics. That's why my next question is to Anna. Anna, you have experience in both social and political action in Madrid. What are the concerns related to the food system that you most often encounter in your conversations with citizens? And how has the awareness of this issue changed among the decision makers in Madrid over the years? And do you have any concrete examples that you could maybe share with us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was a spokeswoman for an association, one of the first ones in Madrid, like 20 years ago. And this was, as I said, one of the first sustainable food associations. And we were developing a network of like 10 or 12 associations in the whole city, and where we were helping each other to grow in organic selling and buying, and we were promoting local products. We were into reducing food waste at that time. That was like a bit like new ideas, developing new ways of approaching to the way we consume products. We also helped helped to create jobs in the regional area of Madrid with organic agricultures that couldn't live on. I mean, we were like supporting them because we in the big city, we were like, you know, boosting their businesses in the rural areas. So it was all a network that were starting to grow. And I have that experience from this beginning in this city. Also, it was very important to have this direct relationship with the producers, so we could trace the whole process of the food that reached our tables. So yes, that's been happening in every city. I mean, most of the cities that are like in this kind of things. But then at the time, me and many of my friends, many of my colleagues were missing something. Because, well, this is about food sustainability, but also about food justice. We shouldn't forget about that. And us as a political party that are defending animal rights and the environment, we were into food justice example, I mean, system. And that is also to take into account the way we relate to animals and not forget about the way we produce meat, eggs, dairy products. In all these associations, they were still selling this. The veganism wasn't starting 20 years ago in these associations I'm talking about, in these neighborhoods in Madrid, but now it's totally different. Now we can say that a revolution is being in place, and more and more people are asking themselves what they eat, but not only from a food sustainability or environmental way of thinking, but also the way we produce all this meat and these dairy products, etc. And I think that's very important because that's veganism. And as we all know, and if we want to remember some words from the United Nations, a global change to a vegan diet is vital to save the world from hunger, also to save the world from fuel poverty, and also to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. We all know that. And also PACMA, our political party, would add to that also to end the suffering of millions of animals. We think that's food justice. So I think there's been a huge leap forward here in Madrid city, because of course, I mean, not the whole population is like concerned about these issues, I'm afraid, but a certain portion, very huge amount of people, young people and middle-aged people are now, you know, with this in mind, and this is a big change, and that happened in maybe 10 years only. So imagine the impact organizations and political parties like us could have on these changes. So yeah, that's really, you know, good to envision and to go towards that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing this information. I personally am always really interested in animal rights parties because they are not in every country. So it's great to see that in Spain, which is rather traditional when it comes to food, and it's a big part of the culture, there's a party that does so much, and there's the change that you're bringing. So thank you very much. And if we're we keep talking about food in every question essentially, but now I have a question that's specifically about labeling. In what role it plays in the transition to a sustainable food system. And that's a question to Axel. What role does labeling play? And why is it so important to spread awareness of the harm caused by food produced under the contemporary food system?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question and also for inviting me for this conference, which is such an important event to have to exchange our ideas and to get a bit further in our discussion. Labeling, I think at the very beginning, I must say labeling in a way is a symptom of the brokenness of the food system. Because if everybody took care of nature and climate and soil health and animal welfare and human health and fairness in working conditions and so on, if everything was perfect, there wouldn't be any need of labeling. But labeling is there because people don't trust in what they can buy in the supermarkets. They are not sure what the food has been produced like, what are the ingredients. So there are thousands and thousands of labels which are very confusing, but in a way they seem to be necessary because people now, more and more consumers want to know that they get something which is fair, which is respecting animals, which is respecting the climate. And so this is why we cannot avoid any labeling, but labeling is something that should accompany the change of the food system, that should also help to make people aware of the problems. If we suddenly start labeling products as vegan, then of course some people ask questions, what about veganism? Why do we need vegan products? Or if we have labels for animal welfare, so people start discussing about it. And then of course, if you want a label, you need a certain transparency, you need a certain reliability. And this is also there in the field where I am working. We have set up guidelines and a standard where exact prerequisites are defined and which have to be followed. So there is an auditing system, there is a controlling and certification system behind it to make sure that the consumer who uses the label, who sees the label in the supermarket, really also gets the right product and has transparency from field to table for his products. Of course, the whole funny and the awful thing about it is that those who try to do a good job already, they are punished because they have to prove that they are doing the good work. And those who are destroying the environment, who are harming animals, who are polluting the world and killing biodiversity, they can go on as they did before. They even get a lot of subsidies from the government. All the food systems oriented not to ask any question about this, but those who have really make an effort to change it, they have to prove that they do a better work, and they need all the inspectors on their fields, the control, all the input they use along the process. So this is a very absurd system in a way, but we cannot do without it at the moment. And we are really supporting this labeling system so these things become more visible in the world. And but a label, as I said, has to be reliable and all along the process. And we even promote it from the farm, because if you look at a vegan product and you say, oh, it's beautiful, there are no any ingredients from animal production, or there are no animal ingredients in there, but nobody asks the question how these products were produced. So what kind of farming was behind it? And very often even vegetables, even fruits come from farms which also have animal agriculture, especially in organic farming, where animal manure and animal husbandry is sometimes even a prerequisite and a need. So in a way, what is also important to show all along the supply chain, how has the product been produced? And this is something we can even speak about more a bit later. But I think this is a very important aspect of labeling also, to have a transparency from field to table for the product, how it was produced, and not only the ingredients. So we need this transparency for the consumers, and the label has to guarantee that all requirements are met, which are defined in a certain standard. I have to talk about greenwashing, because in the multitude of labels we have nowadays, there's a lot of greenwashing. There are many labels which sound very nice, which give a comfortable feeling to the customer that is doing something good for the animals, good for the environment. If you just look at the animal welfare labels they're discussing at the moment in Germany, they give 10 square centimeters more space to the animals, and then they say this is produced according to animal welfare. So there's a lot of greenwashing behind it. And that is why we have to look at the labels, how they're organized and how strict they are and how much confidence they can give. And there's a lot of work to be done for the public awareness that in the future, this discussion becomes much more transparent and people, consumers, are much more conscious and aware of what they are buying. And this is what we have to work together to put this awareness to the front. I think this is what I want to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, well, you highlighted a very important thing that also was mentioned before, that we need to be aware of everything, in a sense that even if it's vegan, we need to look even beyond it or behind it to see how indeed it was produced, and to be able to really ensure that what we are doing is correct and it's really helping. But I think that the discussion on labeling, I know for a fact it's, at least the EU is working on some regulations being discussed, which is a good first step. But I wish it was just done faster and years ago, not now. But it's a very interesting topic, and thank you for sharing all this information with us. And if we're with the consumer and the individual, I would like to ask Alexander about vegan catering. Because, Alexander, you have co-authored several publications, including the Catering for Everyone 2023 policy report. And I would like to ask you, what does the provision of vegan catering in the UK look like, and what are the projections for it? How far are we from sustainable procurement in the UK?
So it's a complicated picture right now. But we've done some interesting research to try and help vegans to navigate the public sector catering space. So what we did was we sent freedom of information requests out to all the councils across the UK, asking them a set of questions to try and get an impression of how inclusive they're being of vegans, how many meals that they're offering that are vegan, that kind of thing. So what we found was about just a small handful, really, of higher tier local authorities in the UK are actually doing kind of very good work to be inclusive of vegans. This might mean, 30% of their or more of their meal options are vegan, and that they have good climate goals that include reduction in animal product consumption, that kind of thing. But really, most councils across the UK are doing limited work to be inclusive of vegans and to offer good vegan options. So this might mean, a limited option of vegan food available on their menus in their catering, in events, or for their canteens, or on care home menus, or libraries, or any other building or institution that are run and operated by the council. There might be some councils who do acknowledge veganism as a protected characteristic under UK law, but some who don't. What we found was about a quarter of higher tier local authorities in the UK don't, or they failed to acknowledge veganism as a protected characteristic under UK law. So there's some work to do in terms of how these councils think about vegans and think about the importance of vegan catering. But there are also a kind of troubling handful of councils that are doing really poorly. They don't have any vegan meals available to the people living in their councils, or that they actively say they don't consider veganism to be a protected characteristic under UK law, and have very poor climate action goals. So there's some that a lot of work is needed. But I mean, there's some councils that I think are worth mentioning as doing especially good work. City of Edinburgh Council, for example, was the first European capital city to endorse the plant-based treaty. So they're actively taking steps to be more inclusive of vegans and acknowledging the importance of reducing meat and dairy consumption. The Oxfordshire County Council was another council in the UK that endorsed the plant-based treaty, and as a result of that, they now cater all of their events completely vegan, so they're doing great work. So in light of this, our ask as the Vegan Society is for local councils across the UK to provide at least one sort of meal on all public sector catering menus every day without it being a specific ask, without people having to specifically request it. So this is aligned with the National Food Strategy, which is what came out a couple of years ago. And it came out with a series of recommendations for the government about how to improve our food system. And one of the recommendations was directly about the need to improve public sector catering, given that 1.9 million meals each year are provided in public sector catering. So that's a lot of food. That's a lot of people that are being catered for. And if we can transition to a more sustainable food system and more people can go vegan, that's obviously going to be a great thing, given how much food is provided. So that's the general picture at the moment. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but provided that these local authorities and policymakers engage with us on our work, hopefully things can improve in the future.
Thank you for sharing. I'm really amazed that there are countries that actually provide fully vegan catering. This is something I wish I could see everywhere in Europe. And as you said, we are on the pathway towards it. So there is we are ending the first round of questions on a positive note. And now I would like to go back to Professor Skubała. You mentioned that you like strong words. So I will ask you, is it time for an evolution or a strong word, revolution of the food system that we have today? Some experts say that we are no longer facing a climate crisis, but a climate catastrophe. So do you think we have time for evolving, or rather we should revolutionize?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this question. Yeah, let me give you a few examples of future scenarios outlined by outstanding ecologists, biologists, and climatologists. These examples will give us a clear answer whether we can talk about a crisis or a catastrophe, whether we need an evolution or a revolution in agriculture. They will give us also answer to the question, how much time do we have to react, to change our way of eating, the way we produce food, how much time we have. These scenarios will come true, assuming we do nothing or do too little. For now, we are not reducing greenhouse gases emission fast enough, including the huge emission generated by modern agriculture. These scenarios will also come true if we do not other things, if we do not protect large parts of our planet quickly enough, if we will not carry out a grand restoration or reforestation plan. We should remember that it is not enough to reduce greenhouse gas emission, including those from agriculture and to a large extent from industrial animal breeding. We must simultaneously reduce greenhouse gases emission and take care of biodiversity, effectively protect 30, according to scientists, but politicians agree, protecting 30% of our planet by 2030 and 50% of our planet, land and oceans, by 2050. So let's see what can happen in the coming decades when we do not make a complete change in agriculture, but also in transport, industry, construction, the way we eat, the way we live. The first example, Professor Mauro Bologna from the University of Tarapacá in Chile and Dr. Gerardo Aquino from the Alan Turing Institute in London decided to estimate the probability of self-destruction of our civilization, taking into account only one factor, the rate of deforestation. We should remember that today the main reason for deforestation is agriculture. The models indicate really extremely worst case scenario for our future. At the current rate of deforestation, our civilization has 2 to 4 decades, so 20 to 40 years left before its final collapse. Numerical simulation indicated that there is less than 10% chance that we will survive a major catastrophe. Deforestation. Remember that the main reason of deforestation today is agriculture, animal breeding. Another example of these future scenarios, Teresos and other authors used annual forecast from 1850 to 2100. Forecast of temperature and precipitation for over 30,000 marine and terrestrial species to estimate the duration of their exposure to potentially hazardous climatic conditions. In a high emission scenarios, we didn't change enough or nothing. Such sudden collapse of ecosystem of nature functioning is possible by 2030 in tropical oceans and will spread to tropical forests and occur at higher latitudes by 2050. So, most animals, plants will not be able to function, to live, if we will not change our way of eating and other things. And the time is really very, very short. Third scenarios, according to an international team of archaeologists, ecologists, and climatologists, with continued greenhouse gas emission in 2070, so 50 years, to 3.5 billion people would be living outside the climate niche in which humans has lived for 6,000 years. Large parts of our planet, where 1/3 of people will live, will become as hot as the hottest parts of the Sahara within 50 years. This is truly worst case scenario in which 1/3 of the world's inhabitants will be outside the climate niche in 50 years. Yeah, and maybe one example from Poland. What can happen in Poland, in our country with nature, if we will not transform agriculture and other things. Scientists from the Polish Academy of Science predicted that within a dozen or more decades, between 15 to 40, 50 years, as a result of climate change, 3 species, such as Scots pine, Norway spruce, European larch, and silver birch, may disappear from Poland. This is only 4 tree species, but they constitute now the main component of our forest stands, growing on nearly 75% of forest area. So within 15, maybe 30, maybe 40 years, 75% of our trees, forests can disappear. But we should remember that the hundreds of other species of plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms are associated with these trees. For them, it also means extinction. So I hope that I will give a clear answer if we can say about crisis or catastrophe, about what we need, evolution or revolution. I hope that these examples, these scenarios give clear answer for us. How important is the change of our world, and the main problem, one of the main problem, our agriculture, our way of eating. Thank you.
Thank you very much for painting this picture so vividly. Listening to this, and especially also when you mentioned Poland, which I also come from, it really hits you very hard when you hear concrete examples of what will happen, because oftentimes when we talk about climate change and climate catastrophe, because of different lobbies, we're used to hearing about it in the sense that it's a distant problem, that it's something will happen in the global south, something will happen far away from us, which we should also care about. But of course, most people care about their own house. And hearing these very concrete examples really makes you aware how deep we are in this problem. And we often don't realize, we just go by our day just like that. And we should spread this message with these concrete examples, because they are very illustrative. So thank you very much for sharing them. And if we are, we will stay within the extremes and the reality that is, we have a very extreme reality. I would like to ask Dr. Peter Carter, climate warming comes down to the fact that we are experiencing more and more extremes. And in the face of these threats, what do you think is the food of the future, and why we should move in that direction?
Thank you. That's a great question. I should start by saying what our food isn't. We've heard very well now that we cannot continue as we are. We cannot continue emitting greenhouse gases, right? Atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased over 50%. Atmospheric methane has increased over 150%. These numbers and other numbers tell us that we really have no time left. We have to make the change. We have to make it now. And really, if we're going to make changes at all, the time to do them is now. So we've had 30 years since the United Nations Earth Summit, Sustainable Development, and the Convention on Climate Change, and we have made no progress whatsoever. We heard from the Sustainable Development Summit that on at least 8 of the indicators, we've actually gone into reverse. So we're not doing evolution, so we have to do revolution. We have to make transformative changes, and we have to do it now. What can't we eat is basically the way I'm going to cheat a bit and answer your question. No meat, no dairy. I was surprised some years ago when I discovered the methane footprint of dairy mostly in developing countries, unfortunately. Over the past 20 years, the use of animal product as food has increased 14%. Meat emissions, as a result of that, have contributed over 40%, over 30% rather, but dairy has contributed over 40%. So in other words, a plant-based diet is not good enough, because to control methane emissions, we have to stop dairy, right? It also means no wetland rice. A huge emitter of methane, and I mean huge, is the wetland rice. That's a huge problem, of course, because that's not only a staple for so many people in China, Vietnam, Cambodia, India. It's sort of their way of life. But we have to look at the science, and the methane emissions are really ballooning enormously as the surface of the planet warms, and we have wetland feedback already. So we're into a feedback situation, which is absolutely terrible. from natural wetlands, but rice is also a thing. The other thing we can't eat is fish. The oceans are, we depend ultimately on healthy oceans. And fish are a intricate part, obviously, of not only the ocean ecosystem, but the ocean's carbon sink. Because when fish die and the skeletons fall to the bottom, that puts carbon into the ocean sediment, and it's a carbon sink. So we can't eat all those things. So what can we eat? I guess the answer is, well, we can eat everything else, right? We're very lucky, at least in the developed world, because we can substitute absolutely anything, any form of meat, with a vegan option just across the road from me. This even extends to plant-based tuna, right? So the business has everything covered now. So this is actually great progress. But we have to now act socially and personally with our families in a revolutionary manner. And we have to stop eating all of these foods that are emitting greenhouse gases. So we're seeing all the extreme weather events, as you mentioned. Every year, they're getting worse. I mean, they are mega disasters. They're unprecedented, right? All over the world, right across the Northern Hemisphere. We've seen this for the past 3 years now. And so we have to respond. We have to respond to that because, as the IPCC said, those extreme weather events are increasing. They're due to human greenhouse gas emissions, and they will continue to increase. That means a revolutionary change, absolutely, for certain. Then there's the economics. When you get down to the motivation for all of these unhelpful things that we're doing to the planet, it's actually driven by our economy. Our economics is a very irrational economics. There's a very important study just been released by the World Bank. It's very important. It's a study on subsidies on fossil fuels, subsidies on agriculture, livestock, etc., and subsidies on fisheries. And those subsidies amount, according to the World Bank, to at least $7 trillion a year. And their number goes up to $12 trillion a year. So we also have to pay attention to the irrational, perverse economy, which is driving us in the wrong direction. We also have to have an economy of thoughtfulness and kindness. We have to switch from war and competition, right, to cooperation and kindness. And then I'll finish up by just mentioning the awful numbers that you are well aware of. So 70 billion land animals a year are killed for food that we eat and emit deadly greenhouse gases. Trillions of marine animals are being killed for food. And so when I talk these numbers, of course, I'm talking industrial scale, right? Industrial animal agriculture, industrial marine fisheries. You wouldn't believe the number of boats that are out there on the high seas every day, and the huge industrial capacities that they have. So we have to leave the forests, we have to leave the ocean, and we have to transform our agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned so many things. I'm trying to just gather my thoughts because there is also a very bleak picture. But ultimately, I think I could summarize what you said with we should just listen to science and we should be kind. And that includes transforming our food system in a way that's good for all people, also in the developing countries, but also to just leave spaces that are not ours to use and abuse. And that also stems from kindness to other species and to the planet. And I'm very happy that kindness, it's a theme for today's, the first day of the European Vegan Summit in 2023, because we talked also about it in the opening plenary. It's a nice picture to see veganism, science, and kindness as it should be. Now I would like to direct a question at Anna. I would like to move from Canada to Spain. What are the biggest weaknesses of the current food system in the Spanish capital? Because Spain has a huge cultural impact on the entire world, on many countries, developing, developed. And I'm wondering whether Madrid could become a global example for the coherent introduction of a sustainable food system.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, although I've already mentioned that in this city, more and more people are concerned about what they have on their plates, what they eat. Unfortunately, Madrid is very far away from being an example, and because we still have many issues to tackle. First of all, is reducing consumption, of course, of meat and dairy products. That's something that people, it's habits, normal habits for most of the population. And that's vital because we know that these products are the main contributors to global warming. Then increasing consumption of locally produced products. That's very important. Lately, we've seen that many supermarkets, many shops are selling products from South America. Many vegetables, mainly fruits, are being imported from these countries, from South America. And we all know the huge impact, environmental impact involved in all this transportation. And then now I'd like to explain to all of you the huge impact, environmental and social and health impact of macro farms here in this country. Because in Madrid, most of the meat that people are consuming come from macro farms. 85% of farms all around Spain are macro farms, not small like businesses. Rather the opposite, macro farms with millions and millions of animals. In fact, it sounds really crazy, but pig population is higher in Spain than people. More pigs than people now in Spain. In fact, Spain is becoming somehow the dumping place of Europe because of the excrements and urine that are very, very, I will get back to that later. Because it's really a problem, environmental problem. Also, the environmental cost is not just because of this waste that is very difficult to manage. Because of these excrements are leaking into aquifers and the soil, and then that means that population all around these places are getting every kind of different illnesses, cancer, and many difficult health problems, even not drinkable water because of the contamination of the aquifers. It's a huge, huge environmental problem. And also I like to point out that the amount of water to get all these meats is a huge amount of water. In fact, the annual water consumption of 500 people is equivalent of the water that a farm needs to carry on their activity. So 500 people, one farm. So that's lots and lots of liters of water. And also with these macro farms, a social problem is also arising, because they are selling the rural areas to the meat industry. Macro farms are not really a source of socio-economic benefits, because where they are settled, they create damages, also reducing the development possibilities of the areas, because they generate even less employment than extensive and organic farming, since everything is automatic. So they don't, they don't give people the chance to be employed. And I'd also like to highlight that 910 million animals are slaughtered in Spain for human consumption every year. 900 million animals are slaughtered every year. And of course, as PACMA, we are against all forms of exploitation and animal suffering. And we do legally all that is in our hands to stop this industry of macro farms, since it's really, a nightmare in this country. And then on top of that, what we have is millions and millions of animals being transported abroad. I mean, they come from northern Spain, they go southern Spain in trucks, and they are transported to Morocco. And these are millions and millions of animals. It used to be like, I don't know, like one sheep every week, but now it's like 4, 5, 6, 7 every day, with millions of animals suffering overcrowded conditions, deprived from any sort of being able to move, deprived from water, from food, and many of them arrive dead when they reach destination. So yes, this is a complete broken system. And as PACMA, we really, it's important to communicate that food sustainability is also involving animals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I personally want to thank you for highlighting and bringing us back to animals, because at the end of the day, we are not only, in our kindness, we should not only think about the environment and ourselves, which is easiest. It comes to humans very easily, but also about animals, because it's not their fault what they're in. We are destroying their lives of billions and billions of animals in every country. I know the numbers for Poland. You mentioned numbers of those farms and the ships and everything for Spain, but how many countries do we have in the world? And in every country,
all over Europe. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, it's so many. These are numbers that I cannot even picture. The amounts of beings that suffer, have the same capacities to suffer as we do. But that's a very deep discussion as well. But I would like to, so sadly we don't have enough time, but we have 3 days of the European Vegan Summit, and we hopefully can explore the ethical dimension for animals as well. But thank you very much for painting this picture for us. You mentioned, you talked about the farms, and here I would like to ask Axel, what is the future of agriculture? What are the biggest advantages of switching to plant-based agriculture?
Yeah, I think we heard a lot about the harmful effects of animal agriculture, so I don't have to repeat all this. I think it is very obvious for all of us what the problems are. And in the vegan movement and all the different organizations and NGOs that are discussing vegan and plant-based diets worldwide, there's always the question that we have to reduce animal agriculture, that we have to switch to plant-based diets for all the obvious reasons. So this is something that we have been thinking about very much also in our little work group we started a few years ago in Berlin. And we thought, how can this technically work in agriculture? Because even, all these movements talk about how to reduce animal husbandry, etc., etc. There is sometimes a missing link how to practice this in actual farming, because, you don't see it anywhere. You get products in the supermarkets which are vegan, but as I said already on the label, you don't see how they were farmed. Most of them come from animal agriculture. So there we have to look for a new solution. And this was the incentive when we started the Biocyclic Vegan movement. And of course, at the beginning, we had a discussion. We said, well, of course, if we look at conventional farming, conventional agriculture, with chemical fertilizers and pesticides, you can create vegan farming very easily because you don't need animal manure for farming. You can just put all chemical fertilizers. And then we really said, well, this is not a solution. Although today, most of the vegan products are conventional. So on one side, it's a good approach, but that's not enough because we have to look also what is happening to the soil, what is happening to biodiversity. And there we see the really devastating effect of conventional farming, how the microbiome of the soil is destroyed, how biodiversity is killed with all the pesticides. So this is not vegan in a way. It also kills, like we kill big animals when we eat meat and dairy, we kill all the small life of the planet in using all the pesticides. So we have to look for a regenerative organic approach. And this was the beginning of Biocyclic Vegan farming. We said we have to look for a very regenerative form of agriculture. And this is something we started. Of course, when we discuss with people, especially from organic farming, they say, oh, without animal manure, it is impossible to achieve a sustainable soil fertility because you need the animal manure to replace the chemical fertilizers. But then when we look at it more precisely, what the animals eat is plants. So the nutrients we put into the soil come from the plants. They go through the animal, but we do not need the detour via the animal, but we can put it directly. We can create all the methods of green manure and compost. And also we can use the plants and we can use the microbiome in the soil, which attracts the nitrogen from the air. So there are new solutions, new ways in organic farming, which show how this can really work as a completely regenerative approach to agriculture, even increasing yields. And as we don't need that much land anymore for animal grazing or for especially fodder for animals, we don't need all the cereals in soil from the rainforest because we get everything directly from our land in a certain region even. So we can even rewild land, we can recreate a natural environment for the planet. So this is all behind, but we have to integrate this discussion into the vegan discussion. So I'm very happy that this time Biocyclic Vegan Farming has been invited to the summit because I think we can really offer solutions. It's not that we can say, oh, we have to test it, but we see the farmers who start working like this, they are fascinated how the effects come after a few years, how they even get better yields, how everything works well. Of course, in farming, it takes some time, but it does work. And not only in gardening with vegetables, but you can even, we have farms which are 1,000 hectares and which do cereals and which have been working for decades in a purely plant-based way, and it works. So this is the message I want to give to the Congress, to the world, that we have to start doing this. And there, of course, we need all the support from politics and from all the NGOs, all the vegan organizations to promote this, to create awareness of this, that there are solutions and this is possible. Thank you
very much. I wanted to say that we're very happy to have you here as an example of one of the solutions and to show how easy it can be to have those solutions implemented. And you mentioned a very important thing that also Dr. Peter Carter mentioned, that our economy is illogical because, as you said, we have an agricultural system that involves an extra step for no reason. And people, once they try that it can be done differently, they see that it's easy and it is more simple. So why are we going in circles and involving so much unnecessary destructive elements? So thank you very much for sharing this and highlighting this. And I have a last question in this round for Alexander, because we talked about, I think, everything that comes to mind for me when we talk about veganism, except for health, or we mentioned health, but I have I wanted to ask you, because I would imagine that decreasing the health costs that come with introducing vegan diets are a good argument for cities, for councils to implement vegan catering, to changing the way they provide food. And what other arguments could there be for cities to switch to sustainable food systems?
Yeah, so there's some, the main reasons for going vegan have been, largely covered, and you mentioned health, which I want to go on to in a minute. But I think when it comes to, say, cities or countries thinking about other good reasons to going vegan, inclusivity would be a strong case, that cities who are wanting to demonstrate that they are inclusive of everyone's lifestyle, vegan diets can be eaten by everyone and enjoyed by everyone, regardless of any religious or moral dietary restrictions you might have. And that kind of brings me on to a second point about reputation as well. A lot of countries and cities are bolstering their reputation by doing things like endorsing the plant-based treaty or improving vegan catering provisions. But another thing I wanted to mention was also food waste. I mean, we know that food waste is a massive problem for cities and countries across the world. Food waste is responsible for a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. In the UK, it's about 19 million pounds worth of food is wasted each year, and that translates to about 15 billion meals are gone or wasted. And that's a problem when it comes to any kind of food, whether it's fruit and vegetables, but it's particularly a problem with meat and dairy products, which are some of the most, they are the most carbon intensive food product. And in the UK, it's about 10% of all of the meat produced from cows, pigs, and birds like chickens are wasted. So that's millions of animals in the UK are farmed and killed only to be thrown away and wasted. So it just shows how wasteful our food system can be, but also how heartbreakingly pointless meat consumption is, given how much animals are ultimately just thrown away after they're killed anyway. So with food waste is a big problem. Some cities are doing some good work in Europe. I know Porto in Portugal, for example, has been doing some good initiatives around food redistribution, that kind of thing. But a lot of work can be done when it comes to food waste. And you mentioned health. So we know that there are good health reasons to go vegan. We know that if you're on a vegan diet, you reduce your risk of developing heart disease, strokes, dementia, diabetes, and a whole other range of health problems. So we have some good arguments, but one thing that we're currently lacking is a sort of accurate accounting of exactly how much money health systems could save if we were to transition to a sustainable food system, if everyone was to go vegan. There are some estimates out there, but they're based on, say, modeling from different countries, and doesn't really give us that much to go on in the UK. So what we're doing at the Vegan Society is we're in the very early stages of a research project which would model exactly how much, if everyone went on a vegan diet, how much that would save the NHS every single year. So hopefully within the next few years, we'll be able to have a number that we can present to policymakers and say, if we all went vegan, we would save our health system a lot of money. We're hoping that whatever we produce can be used by researchers in different countries in Europe, whether that's Poland or Germany, Spain, wherever, and say the health system in this country could be saving a lot of money if everyone went vegan. So we're hoping that we'll get that research out and be able to present it to policymakers in the near future. And it will give us even stronger evidence to fight our case for why a transition to a sustainable food system is important.
Thank you very much. I mean, I really hope. I mean, one strength that I noticed about the vegan community is that it's very strong and really wants to share the information. And the research you're doing definitely will be used by so many organizations. That's one thing I know for certain. And I hope that countries and cities everywhere, also outside of Europe, are as willing as the English ones, the ones in the UK, to adapt and to uphold the reputation. But that's of course a political matter as well, and at least in some countries. And with this, I found a very smooth transition to a question from the audience, because we'll now move on to our Q&A session. And I have a question actually for all of our speakers. So I will ask, because we still have 20 minutes left of this panel, so we'll ask all of our guests to try to just answer as briefly as possible, of course, as long as you're comfortable, so we can cover as many questions as possible, because I have quite a few. But the first one is actually about politics, because somebody wrote that the title of this panel is the major sins. So I'm wondering, what are the 3 main sins that politicians do for the food system now? So I would like to ask, maybe I will start with Anna, because she's a politician. What are the 3 main sins that politicians commit when it comes to the food system?
Well, of course, I can speak here from Spanish politicians. We have had a progressive government. And we were, we still at PACMA, we don't have a representation in the Congress so far. So we don't have a seat yet. We are struggling for it, but we don't have a still representation. But what we know is that politicians, and we were amazed at how progressive politicians with a certain, approach to environmental issues, and we were supposing that they were going to behave in another way, but they were promoting meat consumption. They were promoting macro farms. They've been promoting, all sorts of damage, environmentally speaking, and also from an ethical point of view, because of animal rights things. So what I have to say is that they are not really working towards the idea of what we have in mind about sorting out all these broken food problems, let's say. So that lack.
Thank you very much. I maybe will ask now Professor Skubała, because I'm very curious about his take on Polish politics, possibly. I will selfishly ask about Poland again. The question was about 3 major sins that politicians commit about the food system, for the food system.
Yeah, from my perspective of view, will we be able to change the politicians? Politicians, they need education. If we will not be able to change their way of thinking about our planet, about nature, about life, there's no future for us. There's future if we people thinking in a environmental way, like if we will be politicians, it's possible, but now we have other politicians, and they if we will be able to engage them, start to love the earth, to feel like a part of this planet, of biosphere, and feel empathy to others beings, non-human beings. Yeah, it's possible our future, but the main point is to find a way to their hearts without changing the way of thinking about our planet, nature, love. There's no future. So we must concentrate how to change the way of thinking into the so-called ecological, symbiotic. I like this term. So there's only for me the only scenario. Otherwise, we will not. The scenario of the collapse of our civilization is quite possible.
Thank you very much. So now I will maybe ask Axel, because in Germany you have Greens in the government. So I'm wondering whether they are not the entire government, of course, but I'm wondering how you perceive the sins that politicians possibly commit, if that's a reality in Germany as well.
I wouldn't call it sin. I would call it dilemma, because especially the Greens, but also other people, they know what they want. They have scientific evidence. They know what the solutions are, but they are afraid of public opinion and of polls, because if once they decide something which goes into the right direction, they are no longer in power. And this is something they have to cope with, because they want to have a good effect in the background, but publicly they are not able to do anything good, especially when we talk about veganism or diet. The Green Party, some years ago, they just suggested one day, they call it Veggie Day, once a week in canteens, and so to have a vegan offer or a vegetarian offer. And this is why they lost the elections some years ago. So we are in contact with the German Ministry of Agriculture from the Green Party. And he always says, well, vegan farming is not possible because you need the manure. He knows it's different. We informed him, but still he promotes this idea because he's afraid of all the farmers, of the organic movement, for instance, who would then fight against him. And he has always to find a balance. This is a dilemma. And they remain in their old channels, because if they want to change it too abruptly, so they are not in their position anymore. So we think we can work with politicians, but it's always very delicate. But we also have to look at the civil society. We have to look at the industry. I think the food industry is much more advanced than politics at the time, or even finance is much more advanced. So we have to look at these partners as well. But politicians are always following the polls, and they have to look exactly what boils up as a mood in society, and sometimes they cannot control it. This is what my opinion is in Germany.
Thank you very much. I think that's a sad reality, and personally, I'm very happy that there are some politicians that take into consideration people, but also they have their rules and values and they uphold them no matter what. And they are present at the European Vegan Summit as well. So this is a great chance to listen and to ask questions. So to politicians that are a bit different, but of course, that the mainstream approach and the polls, that's the sad reality. That's how politics are constructed. That's how parties are orientated as well. And what's the reality in the UK, Alexander? Because I must admit, I don't know that much about UK politics anymore, and especially after leaving the EU. So what are the sins that British politicians commit?
So I'd say the three main, one would be UK politicians maybe pandering a bit to meat eaters and to animal agricultural farmers. And I think that comes in this kind of like culture war way where politicians make a direct link between meat eating and the culture of the country, and by choosing, not to eat meat, or choosing to advocate for veganism, you're somehow attacking the culture itself, which I'm sure is also a thing in other countries. I'm sure it's a problem in Spain, no doubt. But yeah, I think that's a big issue, is politicians maybe whipping up a bit of a frenzy about culture wars, and veganism being a part of that. I think another sin would be a lack of vision. I think there's a lot of politicians want to just pursue the status quo because it's just easier to do what you're already doing rather than make big changes. So a lack of vision would be a big part of it. I mean, if you look at politicians' manifestos whenever they come out ahead of an election, it's small changes that are nowhere near where we need to be. So that would be another sin. And the third for me would be closed decision making as well. I think there isn't enough consultation of a wider range of stakeholders in the UK when it comes to our agricultural policies. So, we have, say, a National Farmers Union, which claims to be the voice of farmers in the country, but they're very supportive of animal agriculture and push back on some of the things we've been talking about today. And then you have, say, smaller interest groups who advocate for what we've been talking about today, who are kind of pushed out of the conversation entirely. So I think there's a bit of an issue with democracy here, of this need to widen the conversation a little bit, that we're lacking in the UK. So yeah, those would be my issues.
Thank you. I'm wondering, because I really like what you said about the lack of vision. I think that's something that doesn't come to mind that easily. At least I didn't think about it while reading this question, but I wonder if it's not connected to what Professor Skubała said about the lack of, like, the lack in kind of education and awareness as well. Whether, I think, if you are not aware of certain things, maybe you just pursue the easy, because also maybe you are not aware that certain problems exist. I like to think that way, that politicians are not malicious always, but sometimes it comes from indeed lack of knowledge, which people in power should have, nonetheless. And last but not least, I would like to jump to Canada. What's the reality there? What would be the sins that you, Dr. Carter, would identify, the three sins any sins, any number of sins that politicians commit?
Well, the big thing, and I've seen this unfortunately over my lifetime, the big thing is that politics does not involve ethics, morality, values any longer. What the governments have done, and what the managers of our society have done, is they replaced those which are absolutely essential for a healthy, sustainable civilization. They've replaced those with economics. And our economics is inherently highly destructive. I don't have to go into that. Continued constant economic growth, is clearly irrational. So that's the first big sin, and it's huge. I'll refer for the second one to the excellent World Bank report called Repurposing Toxic Development. So, I mean, I can't think of anything worse. I can't think of any greater evil than our governments taking our money and using that money to destroy our future. And that's literally what they're doing, because our governments are pushing, to the extent of subsidizing, every source of all of the greenhouse gas emissions. There's a reason why greenhouse gas emissions are increasing faster than they ever have, and they're at levels higher than they ever had. And the main reason is our governments and our government's misuse of what they call the economy. So that would certainly be the second thing. The third thing is that our governments completely ignore the science. So we've had very, very excellent explanations of the solid science behind a vegan diet and making this transformation, not eating animals anymore, leaving the fish in the sea to return to their former populations, hopefully. And Greta Thunberg, I remember her saying this time and time again, that the politicians are not listening to the scientists. Now, with respect to climate change, of course, my issue, the sixth assessment of the IPCC was a powerful, powerful assessment. This is a conservative organization, and when they say that we have a narrow, rapidly closing window to secure a livable future, we had better listen up. But our governments had better listen up, because our governments know everything that the IPCC publishes. The governments review them and sign them off. So it's a absolutely terrible. It's the most stupid thing imaginable for our leaders, our governments, to completely ignore our scientists. And that's totally what's happening with respect to climate change. And the two big sources of climate change emissions, namely our energy, so we're still burning more and more fossil fuels, and namely our food, and we are depleting the seas of fish at an incredible rate. And I just was checking projected graph of meat consumption. It's going up. And so my final ask would be, in actual fact, that governments do something that they used to do. They don't seem to do any longer, that they do public reviews on matters of the greatest importance to the population. And that would open up the discussion that we've heard already that needs to be opened up across our communities. And I was very, very happy to hear the experience in the UK of approaching these they seem to be huge problems at the municipal and council level, because that's very important to making some progress here.
Thank you very much. Dr. Carter burst my bubble a little bit, because I just said that maybe some people in power are just not aware of certain things. And I saw Anna agree when he was saying that, no, they know everything, they just don't act on it. Yeah, we need to be realists, not only optimists. Sadly, we are running out of time. The panel is already over. I don't know where the time went. So sadly, I won't be able to ask, and our guests won't be able to answer the other questions that came in the chat. But hopefully we'll have more opportunities to meet and to discuss. And there are still another panel today, and then 2 more days of the European Vegan Summit. So stick around, and maybe you'll have a chance to ask a question at another panel. Here, I would like to say a big thank you to all of my guests and the audience for such insightful, or to my guests for such an insightful debate panel. It was not really debate, for sharing your experiences and dedicating your time to sharing with us this knowledge that we can carry on into our activism and on our activities, just spreading the word and trying to bring the revolution and make it happen as soon as possible. So thank you very much. It was a great pleasure, and I hope to see you very soon.